Okay, we have another question. So there is a teenager who may not want to verbalize thoughts and emotions at school, um, unless to a counselor or until they're home with the mom. So they kind of keep all their emotions in, and then the mom says they may be coming home, aggressive or crying, trying to get them to write things down, draw, talk to someone else, but they refuse. Any suggestions?
I mean,
Is this my child? I'm just not kidding.
that's a tough one. I guess my first thought on that is, is he paired enough with his counselor? So it sounds like he's older, he's a teenager, but we can still talk about pairing. When you get a new student, you talk about pairing. I always think of a 3-year-old and you're playing and this and that, what have you. Does the counselor at school have that person's trust? Because until that counselor has that person's trust, that person's not going to talk to the counselor.
Like when they're not upset. So sometimes if a student only experiences a certain individual when they're already heightened, they pair that behavior with that, or that feeling with that person. And they don't necessarily, like you said, trust that person or have the faith in that person yet. And so it does require developing a relationship that's more proactive, or more like pairing.
So, if the counselor is able to come in, again, I'm not sure what the school looks like, but if the counselor is able to, develop a relationship outside of, hey, well, what's bothering you today? More like, hey, I brought in this really cool game, or hey, did you see this new app? Or hey, I saw that you're like hanging out with so-and-so, and you guys like this. Here you do something else for your food for thought type thing. Those are all really great things to do in terms of pairing with a teenager. Secondly, I would say that, if the teenager is going to the counselor, if that relationship is there, looking at the interaction with the counselor, is the counselor, trying to solve a problem when all the teenager wants is just to talk about it, but not it being solved? Or is the counselor not saying anything when the teenager wants a solution? I've often watched interactions with people whereby, we only focus in on the negative, right? So it's like, hey, I noticed that you engaged in that negative behavior today. Here's what not to do. Here's this, here's that, here's that. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do this. Or, if we do something called a hassle log, and, that hassle log is like a self-reporting after the fact of, how well did you handle a situation? And, a lot of the time that hassle log only comes out when there is a negative behavior. So how well did you handle that situation? Well, not very well, because you blew up. Not so awesome. But what's supposed to happen is that those types of things are supposed to occur also when the student is handling a situation really well. Like, wow, you know what? We talked about those steps to calm down and you used your strategies. That was really awesome. How well did you handle that situation? Amazingly. So you're really trying to flip situations around so that it's not about, oh, what else did you do that was wrong today? Let me point out all your weaknesses. But hey, let's talk about some things that are kind of cool, and let's talk about things that you did do well at so that you feel good about yourself.
And something that I've seen very common is kids don't want to talk about what they did wrong. Like it's too much for them. So we'll sometimes use like books, if, depending on the age of the student. There's a couple of really great like Julia Cook books, which are great because they take a character and they make them go through that situation. There's also some really nice, like if they're older, maybe they like comics, so you can like create a little comic strip, and so you're talking about the character's feelings, and it may not be as painful as if they're talking about their own feelings. So it's a good kind of like segue into talking about feelings in general. And then sometimes I like the idea, like in the question about writing it down, because sometimes verbalizing thoughts and feelings can be really challenging, but creating a system where they can communicate, or they can, without talking. So we'll sometimes use what the zones has to offer in terms of the colors and how they're feeling. And all they have to do is point to that zone or point to that picture, and talking about it when they're calm first. So like it's not just happening when they're upset, but when they're calm, talking about the different areas of the zones and how we all go through that, and taking, your personal experiences, or maybe doing it with a couple kids. It's not specific to like one student. We all really could benefit from learning about our emotions and our feelings. And so it's really an antecedent strategy. It's not something that only comes out when they're upset, but getting them used to somehow communicating and understanding how they're feeling, and then practicing it. So even practicing like taking deep breaths totally when they're calm, like not when they're upset. Practicing going through some sort of calming strategy, practicing like what those strategies are that help you cope or help you manage, and then having them, generalize those tools to when they are actually upset. And it's a process. It really is. It takes time. It takes a while for students. There's like a self-awareness that they need to be able to recognize their own feelings. But try to focus on it when they're not already in that zone, and doing it proactively, like before they're even yellow or red, because then they're going to be less open.
Hopefully we answered your question. If not, type back in the chat and clarify, or ask it in a different way, and we can come back for sure.
Yeah. And then also, I'm just wondering, the second part is that he comes home to mom, crying and aggressive. What's the function there? Like, is he getting so much more attention for it when he gets home? Is there any way that we can, like, does he need that negative attention from mom? Like, is that become reinforcing? Or maybe you switch it off to, like, he brings home like, like, like a note, like that he did really well today, and he gives that to mom. Like, maybe you could like switch the attention from, like, if he gets a lot of attention for coming home upset, maybe he can get more attention for coming home having a great day.